In past videos, we've looked at some of the worst trades in recent years, where one team came out as a clear winner and the other came out as a clear loser when things were all said and done. But now we're looking at the circumstance that's more rare than you'd think, where both teams come out of a huge trade as a winner. A trade where both stars thrived on their new teams, oftentimes playing better than they ever had before, which by far put both teams in a better position going forward. And we have 8 of these scenarios that went down within the past 10 to 15 years. So let's start by looking at number 1. Paul George for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis. The early 2010 Pacers had some solid playoff runs, but after 7 years went by and the team still couldn't take things to the next level, Paul George finally requested a trade. And after the Magic traded Oladipo and Sabonis to the Thunder for no reason at all, the two didn't fit in on their new team. So it made perfect sense to trade them to the Pacers for a superstar. It was risky for OKC though because PG's contract was up after 1 year, but the trade went through, and instantly both sides played the best basketball of their careers. Victor Oladipo instantly became a 2-time All-Star and averaged 23 a game in his first season, while Sabonis has been great off the bench and is now playing even better for Indiana as a starter to start this year. Not to mention the two young stars have done a great job of leading the Pacers into the playoffs when healthy. While on the other hand, OKC was ready to win right away, and teaming up with Westbrook made PG want to stay in OKC, and it was a smart move because after he resigned, he had the best year of his career this past season, putting up 28 points a game, and was in the Defensive Player of the Year and MVP talks. And even though OKC traded him in the long run, out of Oladipo and Sabonis, they really ended up getting 2 years of chances with this duo, and now have Danilo Gallinari, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, and 6 first-round picks from the Clippers, which I mean could have been included in this video as a win-win trade all on its own, with how great it set both teams up, but I just decided to include it here. It gave OKC great building blocks towards their future, and LA the super team they have today, because if they hadn't have gotten Paul George, Kawhi Leonard would have gone to the Lakers. Number 2, Luka Doncic for Trae Young. Alright, most of you probably won't remember this by now, but I will admit in my 7 more worst NBA trades in the past 10 years video, I included this trade in there, because it was halfway through last season, before Trae started to really show what he's made of, and it was definitely too soon to include both Trae and Luka in that video. But now I'm including them in this one to make things right, and just because they deserve to be here anyways. Because during the 2018 NBA draft, the Atlanta Hawks took Luka Doncic 3rd overall, and the Dallas Mavericks drafted Trae 5th. Before the two teams swapped players, and as it turns out the Dallas Mavericks and Atlanta Hawks both have clearly come out of this trade as winners. Things have worked out much better than they would have if Trae was on the Mavs and Doncic was on the Hawks. And both men finished 1st and 2nd for the Rookie of the Year award last year. Sure, they're both basically point guards at this point, but before the draft the Mavs weren't in a great position, and they needed a guy like Luka who could be a superstar, while the Hawks were in an opposite spot, because they were in a position where they were going to land a lot of talent, so they needed a guy who could really excel in more of a traditional point guard role. And they're both definitely living up to the hype right now, to the point where you can't even in the slightest say that either team made a mistake. Plus, drafting them both before last season led them to being in great positions this year, with the Mavs now having 2 superstar caliber players, and the Hawks having a stacked young roster. Number 3, Jimmy Butler for Josh Richardson. This one goes right along with Kevin Durant getting traded for D'Angelo Russell this year. And yes, they just happened, but they gotta be at least mentioned in these win-win trades. I mean, starting first with the Jimmy and Richardson trade, it worked out great for everyone involved, and instead of Philly straight up losing Butler like what was expected, they got a potential star level 2-way player that's still only 26 years old. Now he's not gonna break out as a star while on the 76ers, but he adds to them being as good as they will be, and so far even though his stats don't show it as much, he's played a huge role for them. While on the other hand, Miami got the star that they wanted with this young roster, and cleared up the cap space to do so. And now the team's looking great, and with all their young stars, they're going to be that much better in the next couple of years, while Jimmy's still under contract. And as for the KD and D'Angelo trade, it's the same thing. Both teams got what they wanted. The Warriors got their star for the future, and the Nets got the second piece of their super team. With Golden State's start though, you might think that it would have been better for them to have just kept their cap space, so they could have just kept all their role players, but with Klay and Steph out now anyways, it really wouldn't have mattered. And having either the young D'Angelo Russell or his trade value going forward is going to be a lot more valuable than role players in the next couple of years. Number 4, Shaq to Miami. Back in 2004, coming off of a three-peat, followed up by a year of falling short of expectations, and then losing to the Pistons in the NBA Finals. As we know, Kobe and Shaq had to get away from each other, so Shaq was traded to the Miami Heat for Caron Butler, Brian Grant, Lamar Odom, and a draft pick. And it really worked out for both teams. Now, while Shaq wasn't as dominant as he was for the Lakers and Miami, he was still by far the best center in the league and helped Dwayne Wade lead them to a championship in 2006. So it worked out for Miami. And while it took a little longer to work out for LA, it did because Lamar Odom played a huge part in helping Kobe Bryant win back-to-back championships in 2009 and 10 without Shaq. So this single trade gave both teams a new look and one player that was eventually able to play a huge part in helping them take things to a championship level. Sure, you could say Shaq may have been more helpful, but overall this trade resulted in at least one title for both teams. Number 5, Pau Gasol for Marc Gasol. As a lot of you may remember, back in February of 2008, Pau Gasol was traded for his brother Marc Gasol, in what was thought of at the time as one of the worst trades really in NBA history. Because at the time, Pau was a 20-point per game scorer, a former All-Star, and had already set the Grizzlies' all-time records for games played, minutes played, field goals made, free throws made and attempted, offensive, defensive, and total rebounds, blocked shots, and points in 6.5 seasons. And they traded him for Kwame Brown, Javaris Crittenton, Aaron McKee, and the rights to Marc Gasol, who the Lakers had just drafted 47th overall in the second round. But overall, Grizzlies GM Chris Wallace said that at the time the team was growing kinda stale. They were losing games and there wasn't really a lot of noise around them. Plus, he could just tell that Pau Gasol was ready to leave when he was able to. So he made the best out of it and traded him to the Lakers, who he said by far had the best deal. And it surprisingly turned out to be great. At the time, Marc had just spent a few years playing in Spain and hadn't really made a name for himself. But once he got on the Grizzlies, that all changed, when he quickly developed into one of the better all-around centers in the NBA and played a huge role in the Grizzlies' deep playoff pushes. Nothing serious ever came out of it, but it gave them a chance, and probably a much bigger one than they would have had if they just would have waited until Pau Gasol walked when his contract was up. And speaking of Pau, as you know, it was a win for the Lakers because he played a huge part in helping them and Kobe Bryant win those 2 championships. Number 6, Kevin Love for Andrew Wiggins. Now originally I was thinking that this was a lose-lose situation. I mean, Wiggins hasn't been who he was expected to be, and neither has Kevin Love. Plus Kevin was injured for most of the Cavs playoff runs. And I mean, in the 2016 finals that they won, he really only averaged 8 points a game. But in the grand scheme of things, I think we can still call it a win-win. Because who knows, even though Kevin wasn't the same player and didn't always have a huge impact on the court when it mattered, in the end the Cavs traded for Kevin Love, he contributed to the team, and they ended up winning a championship. Plus everyone can agree they did a lot better than they would have with Andrew Wiggins on the team. And speaking of Andrew Wiggins, the Timberwolves also came out as winners because sure, he's not as good as we thought, but I mean, he's not terrible. And also, in Kevin Love's last season with the Timberwolves, the team finished 40-42. After trading him for Andrew Wiggins and Anthony Bennett, they finished 16-66. And sure, that's not a win, but it was just enough tanking for them to land Karl Anthony Towns in the next year's draft. So no matter how good Wiggins is personally, without him they probably wouldn't have gotten their hands on one of the best centers in the league. So it really did pay off for both teams after all. Number 7, Anthony Davis for Josh Hart, Lonzo Ball, and Brandon Ingram. Alright, here's another one that just went down and we're seeing it play out right now, so I won't spend too long on it. But this trade is looking like it was a perfect move for both teams. The Lakers have looked great so far, and they're really looking like they're going to be as much of a threat in the playoffs as everyone expected. While on the other hand, Brandon Ingram's looking like a superstar for New Orleans to start the year. Things could change because a lot of players do start out strong, and not everyone stays consistent throughout the year. Plus Zion coming back could affect Ingram, but right now he's living up to all the hype that he had when he got drafted. While Lonzo and Josh Hart aren't playing fantastic, but they definitely are playing better than they were for LA, which means that the trade worked out for everyone. And number 8, the Blake Griffin trade to the Pistons. Now by 2017, the original Lob City Clippers team had fallen apart. So Chris Paul was traded in the offseason, and it was surprising when halfway through the year, Blake was also traded to the Detroit Pistons, in a deal that sent him there for Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, Boban, and 2 future picks. And it worked out. Even though Harris led the Clippers to becoming a solid team, they saw the bigger picture and traded him for basically Landry Shamet, 2 first-round picks and cap space that they used to sign PG and Kawhi this offseason. The Clippers got rid of Blake and capitalized on the situation. As for Griffin and the Pistons, well, I won't say things have been fantastic for them since the trade. I mean, they were a little under 500 before he got there and finished 41-41 with him last year. But I will say that before the trade, the Pistons weren't an exciting team and nobody wanted to willingly come play for them. But with bringing in a star like Blake, it's helped put them in a position that's made them more attractive for another star to join him. It hasn't worked yet, but they were able to bring in Derrick Rose and Markieff Morris so far. And if they can gather enough role players like that to play with Blake and Drummond, eventually they could become a real threat in the East. Plus, it helped revive and reinvent Griffin's career to the point now where he's been playing better than ever before. So I'd say it was definitely one for the Clippers, and based on the position they were in to where they're at now, it's a win for the Pistons too. And with that said, it's gonna wrap up the video. We've got a few more trade videos coming up, and a lot of ranking videos coming out pretty soon. So if you don't want to miss those, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, drop a like to show some support, and I'll catch you next video.